Hello, my name is Tej van Pettinger from Economics Help, and today I'd like to talk about COVID, vaccines, wearing masks, and some of the related economic issues to this. So first of all, past 18 months have been quite difficult here in the UK. We've had high numbers of COVID cases, high numbers of hospitalisations and deaths. From a personal point of view, although I've stayed healthy, I do know quite a few close people who sadly passed away from COVID. Some people who helped with our races, good friends, mother and brother. And also my sister, who's a similar age to me, although fit and healthy, she's had long COVID for 18 months, and that's really affected her quality of life. But the first thing we try to learn in economics is not to take just personal anecdotes about, what happened to you. We need to look at the aggregate and the average that's happening in the economy and in this case in society. So there was a big debate about lockdowns because there was this seeming trade-off between locking down to help improve health by bringing COVID under control. But when you lock down the economy, there was a big economic hit, and some businesses and some individuals in particular lost out. So there was a debate about which people felt was most important. But also I feel that the trade-off was much less than imagined, because if you allow COVID to get out of control and case numbers to rise, then people will cut back on their activities even before a lockdown, because they don't want to go out to a restaurant if they feel there's a good chance of getting COVID and getting very ill. And economic normality returns in a situation where people feel that COVID is under control and that we can go ahead with ordinary activity. And a problem in the UK was by delaying lockdowns, COVID cases became very high, and then we needed a longer lockdown to bring it back under control. Whereas other countries who are more preemptive, like for example New Zealand, they had greater success in keeping COVID low and shorter lockdowns in the UK, which seem to at times go on forever. So going forward, there's definitely an economic benefit from bringing COVID under control and bringing cases sufficiently low to allow a normal reopening. But when there are surges, this not only causes health effects but also economic effects. Another big issue is that of taking a vaccine, because the vaccine was developed quite quickly, and some people, because of information they read online or from YouTube videos, are suspicious about what might be the long-term impacts of it. For myself, I was quite happy to get a vaccine a few months ago now, because I weighed up the fact that the benefits of vaccine were greater than the costs. When I took it, I was actually ill for a day. I really felt dreadfully tired all day, so I just kind of lay in my bed. But after that, it soon wore off. But although the vaccine had this negative effect, I felt it was much milder than the effects of getting COVID, which I might have shrugged off because I'm quite young and fit and healthy, or I might have developed long COVID like my sister. That was a fairly small risk, but a risk I didn't want to take. Also, when deciding whether to get a vaccine or not, I was primarily weighing up my personal benefits and personal costs like a good economist would, and I felt the best decision was to take a vaccine. But also at the back of my mind, I felt that it was important to consider the wider social implications. In economics, we talk about the external effects. And by having a vaccine, it is less likely that I will transmit COVID to other people. And for me, this was a big benefit. I spend some time with a person who's quite ill, and he feels that if he got COVID, it would kind of finish him off. So I definitely didn't want to put him at risk. And my friend who has Parkinson's and is quite fragile, he was quite keen to get a vaccine, even though it kind of had quite a big impact on him for a few days, because he's very fragile, very weak immune system. The vaccine made him feel quite ill for 4 or 5 days, really under the weather. But he felt it was worth it, because although he felt ill for a few days, COVID would have been much worse. He might not have been able to cope with that because his lungs are weak. And also, he also felt the same, that he felt that taking a vaccine was kind of his duty, because it was the only way for society to really bring it under control. So it's a good example of where traditional economics emphasizes maximizing personal utility, and a young person may well think, well, I won't be affected by COVID, so I won't do it. Well, that may or may not be true, but also, a new form of economics is really saying we have to not just consider our personal utility, but think about how it affects other people. And part of me felt that if I didn't get a vaccine, I would be kind of free riding on other people who did. What we mean by a free rider is that you get the benefits without any cost. So if everybody else in the society wore a mask, got vaccinated, socially distanced, then that would really bring COVID completely under control. But if you didn't do anything, you would benefit from everybody else making, you could say, the effort. So then you can free ride on other people. But if you get 20 or 30 or 40% of people wanting to be those who don't make any effort, then COVID can't be brought under control. And so everybody is affected by cases remaining high and uncertainty about going out, and some kind of regulations being required to be maintained. Another interesting issue is that of wearing face masks, because when it became known that COVID is often transmitted by water droplets as we speak and sing or speak or whatever, these droplets come out, and it's that can pass the virus on to other people. So wearing a mask can help to significantly reduce this transmission of COVID. Personally, I don't like wearing masks because they are a little inconvenient, and also it's just nice to be able to smile at people. And I think if we always went around with masks, the world would be a less happy place. Maybe something not measured by gross domestic product, but nevertheless important. However, although I personally dislike wearing a mask, I can understand why a government may bring in a mask mandate, because when COVID is at a certain stage in certain public places, the costs of wearing a mask are still much less than the costs of escalating COVID. And it's relatively limited impact on economic output. Unlike, say, a lockdown where businesses have to shut, wearing a face mask is just a relatively minor inconvenience. And when face masks were mandatory in the UK for going to a shop or going on public transport, everybody did it, pretty much. And the good thing is you didn't have to think. You just wore a mask because everybody did it, and was this feeling we were all in it together. Even if you perhaps didn't particularly like wearing a mask or didn't even see the value, everyone was doing the same, so it's okay. But then a few months ago, the government changed and made it voluntary, because they said, we think wearing a mask is very good, but it's up to you whether you do it or not. So what happened is, quite quickly, a lot of people stopped wearing a mask. When you go to a supermarket now, there's only about 20, 30, 40% of people who still wear a mask. And I feel that what happens is that if everybody else is not wearing a mask, you think, why should I bother? Because the prime reason for wearing a mask is to protect other people. It's to protect passing on your germs to somebody else, especially to somebody with pre-existing conditions who may be much more vulnerable. But if no one's wearing a mask, you think, why should I make the sacrifice when nobody else is doing it? One analogy I might give is like a speed limit. in the UK there's a speed limit of 70 miles an hour, because if people drive much faster, it may be more likely to cause accidents. And the government could say, well, we have a speed limit which we think is good, but it's up to you whether you follow it or not. Now, we don't want that situation where a speed limit is voluntary, because we know that some people will exceed it, cause a crash, and it could be us that are hurt from speeding drivers. So with a speed limit, the best outcome for society is a mandatory speed limit. Everybody has to keep to it, like wearing seatbelts. It's a minor inconvenience, but everybody does it. And there was a time 20, 30, 40 years ago where it was actually voluntary whether or not to wear a seatbelt, but now we kind of accept it. Now, I don't particularly like wearing a mask. Recently I flew over to Vienna in Austria, and you had to wear this PF2 mask, which cost €3 from the airport, and a bit tight around the ears, a bit annoying. But at the same time, I could feel that I could fly with more confidence, because if the next person was sneezing and coughing, spluttering, they were spluttering into their mask, and it was less likely that the droplets would go into me and affect me. So it'll be great when we don't need masks, when COVID is under control, but if cases are quite high, there is a case for everybody following a mandate to help reduce the spread, because at least there's limited economic costs involved. And one other thing that I've noticed is that since the mask wearing has been voluntary, you can just sense the feeling that there's quite a bit of judgment going on. People wearing masks kind of slightly annoyed, thinking, oh, I'm making the effort, but these people aren't. And perhaps people who don't wear a mask thinking, why are they bothering to wear a mask when we don't have to? So it creates this unnecessary friction, I feel. And I preferred the previous situation where it was kind of simple, mandated. We were all in it together. Another issue with regard to COVID vaccines and masks is that I have to say one motivation for making this video is that when I log into YouTube to post my economics, YouTube often try to promote the most controversial, the most clickbaity type articles, and you get pseudo doctors or pseudo experts pushing a certain agenda that preys on people's fears and saying how bad a vaccine is without looking at the actual evidence for how vaccines have reduced case rates and death rates amongst those who are vaccinated. And so a big issue in a free market is misinformation. How do you know what is true? How do you know which source to believe? And I feel a problem with the YouTube business model is that it kind of rewards people who take quite a polemic position and push certain agenda for their own financial gain, or because they want to or they feel a very strong polemic attitude towards certain things. As an economist, I sometimes despair at mainstream media, the way they cover economics, and they reduce it to kind of glib, simple things that are kind of, I would say, populist, without investigating all the nuances and the complications involved in making statements. For example, government debt can be problematic, but often in the past 20 years it hasn't. But the way it's covered kind of glosses over a lot of the issues of what it depends upon. So I definitely have reservations about what I believe in mainstream media. But I would say I have even more reservations about sources on the internet which have very strong polemic view, which goes against scientific research and what credible doctors and healthcare professionals say. 40 or 50 years ago, economics was very much concerned with what is in the classical economic view was individuals maximize their personal utility, we take decisions on how to maximize our utility depending on personal benefits and costs. But in recent years, recent decades, we've expanded this to include externalities and thinking about how we affect wider society. So, for example, the environment is a very good one. 100 years ago, economics was concerned with maximizing GDP, but now we realize that we can't just think about our own benefit. We have to think about the environment of the people. So it's an interesting parallel that with things like taking a vaccine or wearing a mask, it's also about this issue of not just what's in our best interest, but also how our actions affect other people. So I sincerely hope that a day will soon come where we don't have to think about COVID, where it's under control and disappearing, because it has been quite a challenging period for many reasons, not least because it's been quite divisive. But what I hope to get you to get from this video is just a few things to think about in terms of what we should base our decisions on. And I hope that you stay healthy, and if you like my videos on economics, you can always subscribe. It's not usually about COVID and vaccines and stuff, but I thought it's quite topical. So, see you later. Bye.